when I realized that my childhood best friend was destined to fall for the poor transfer student and eventually kill me. To survive, I faked my own death. Before jumping into the ocean, I left him a single text message. I saw her touch your hand today. It's so dirty. I'm never seeing you again. He was absolutely devastated. He threw himself into the sea multiple times just trying to find my remains. Meanwhile, I was already on a private jet flying out of the country. 5 years later, I figured he and the transfer student had probably gotten their happily ever after, and it was time for me to return home and inherit my family's billions. I never expected that on the very night I returned, he would lock me up in a cliffside mansion. The man who was always so proud, aloof, and untouchable slowly peeled off his gloves. He dropped to his knees in front of me, almost pathologically obsessed, intertwining his fingers with mine, and kissing my hands relentlessly. Chloe, I'm not dirty. From now on, no one but you will ever touch me. Asher Vance and I grew up together. Since I was a little girl, I firmly believed that we would get married when we grew up and live happily ever after like a princess in a fairy tale. Unfortunately, fairy tales are just fairy tales, and I wasn't the princess. During our junior year of high school, a transfer student joined our class. She had jet black hair, snow white skin, and a gentle, radiant smile. She even talked to stray animals. Without a doubt, she was the real princess. I leaned against the windowsill, looking down at Mia Harper chatting with a bird in the courtyard. Asher stopped behind me, his tone slightly icy. It's PE class. Why aren't you downstairs yet? He had loved bossing me around since we were kids. From what I ate and wore, to my grades and my friends. Because of this, my parents absolutely adore him. After all, what parent wouldn't love a straight-A student who helped keep their own rebellious kid in line? I was used to his strictness, but sometimes I still pushed back, like a rebellious teenager defying a parent. I pointed at Mia down below and asked, look at her. Don't you think she's interesting? Asher followed my gaze and calmly delivered his verdict. Lunatic. But I think she's fascinating. I turned around, testing the waters. What if I became friends with her? Idiot. He dropped those two words coldly and walked away. I knew that meant my proposal was rejected. However, I never could have imagined that just 1 month later, he would be gripping my wrist, forcing me to apologize to Mia. His grip was so tight it left red marks. It hurt. No matter how hard I struggled, I couldn't shake him off. Mia was half kneeling on the ground, her clothes dirty and her knees scraped. What happened to you? I asked. You pushed me down the stairs, and now you're asking me what happened? I glanced at the staircase behind me. I did walk past here just now, but I didn't push anyone. There are no security cameras here, so of course you can say whatever you want. You were the only one who walked by. If it wasn't you, did I just throw myself down the stairs? Why would I even push you? Who knows? Maybe you hate seeing me getting close to Asher. I frowned. I turned to look at Asher. Getting close to him? Didn't he say we only needed each other as best friends? Why did he forbid me from befriending her? Yet he was getting close to her himself? Why was he forcing me to apologize when I hadn't done anything wrong? But those unasked questions were destined to remain unanswered. He just held me down, forcing me to say sorry. At that exact moment, a massive flood of information rushed into my brain. It was the plot. It told me that Asher and Mia were the male and female leads of a romance novel. Mia had fallen for Asher because he unintentionally scared off some thugs who were bothering her. Asher would slowly fall for her kindness and purity. And I was just the vicious, jealous villainess standing in the way of their love. I would eventually be despised and hated by Asher for bullying Mia. And finally, once the two leads got their happy ending, Asher would kill me. My first reaction was, naturally, utter disbelief. But a second later, the hand forcing my head down served as a harsh reality check. It hurt. My wrist hurt and my neck hurt. In the past, if I got a mosquito bite, he would be the first to fuss over it. Now, he was viciously forcing me to my knees to apologize to someone else. I hadn't done it, yet he chose to believe a girl he had known for a month over me. And so, I recalled the ending of that plot again. I would be killed by Asher. Terrified by that thought, I ripped myself out of his grip and ran. I ran all the way home. My mom was arranging flowers in the living room. Seeing me burst in, she quickly asked, "School isn't out yet. Why are you home? Where's Asher?" Asher, Asher, Asher. That's all you care about. He's bullying me to death. Oh, sweetie, did you pick a fight with him again? You know he only does things for your own good. I knew I couldn't reason with her, so I ran upstairs to my room. I locked the door tight and hid under my blankets. I tossed and turned, thinking about the past and this supposed future. Night fell. Asher never came looking for me. Usually, whenever we fought, he was always the first to come coax me out of my mood. He didn't come this time, and I finally made up my mind. I was going to run. Far, far away. On the day of the autumn break, I had previously made plans to go to the beach with Asher. But right before we left, he brought Mia along. The car ride was suffocatingly quiet. Asher cleared his throat, and Mia immediately handed him a water bottle. When their fingertips brushed, Asher only frowned slightly. Asher was a severe germaphobe. He never let anyone touch him. Even when I wanted to touch him, I had to ask for permission first. Yet now, he didn't resist at all. This reminded me of the special exceptions mentioned in the plot. It only cemented my resolve to leave. The ocean breeze was gentle. On the picnic blanket that I had personally picked out, the two of them sat side by side. Asher still had his usual stoic expression, but occasionally when Mia spoke to him, he would reply. I made one last phone call to confirm my arrangements. Then, I asked Asher to walk up the cliffside rocks with me. If he had looked closely, it wouldn't have been hard to notice how bulky my jacket was. Underneath, it was a high-grade life vest. I just wanted to escape. I didn't want to actually die. Even with all the preparations, I was still terrified. If Asher had asked what was wrong, I would have told him. I didn't want to leave the home I had known my whole life, but I wanted to live. If he asked, it would mean he still cared about me. And maybe, just maybe, I could avoid that tragic ending. But we walked all the way to the top of the cliff, and he didn't say a single word. It was so obvious that something was wrong with me, yet he was completely blind to it. Forget it then. If I couldn't change the plot, I would just have to change my own destiny. My parents really love you. Will you take good care of them in the future? Perhaps noticing the strange tone in my voice, he frowned slightly. He just kept his hands in his pockets and gave a vague, dismissive hum. That's good. I smiled at him. though I desperately wanted to cry. We had made a promise that when we turned 18, he would take me skiing. I had never seen real snow. Once we got into college and moved out, we were going to get a pet. I had even picked out the breed. I was going to get a massive Alaskan Malamute. When winter came, I would force him to walk the dog. I wanted him to be so cold and exhausted that he wouldn't have the energy to boss me around anymore. But how could a person's heart change so quickly? I thought you were going to throw a tantrum forever. When he said that, his tone carried a sigh of relief, as if a burden had been lifted. I was moved by that tiny sliver of relief and turned to look at him. I didn't push her. Mia framed me. Do you believe me? He frowned again. Chloe, refusing to admit when you're wrong you'll never have any real friends acting like this. I gave a bitter laugh and didn't ask again. A gust of wind blew past. I said, you go down first. I want to look at the ocean a little longer. Come down with me. It's not safe up here. Just for a minute. You go. I'll be right behind you. He stood stubbornly behind me until his phone rang. It was Mia. Asher, can you come look? I think I got bitten by a bug. Asher hesitated for a second, then dropped a quick, hurry up and come down. Then he turned and left. I sat on the edge of the cliff, watching him walk briskly toward the beach. I let out a soft sigh. It felt like I had used up a lifetime's worth of sighs over these past few weeks. I pulled out my phone and typed one last message. I saw her touch your hand today. It's so dirty. I'm never seeing you again. Once I saw delivered, I smashed the phone against a rock until it was shattered. I turned and leaped into the ocean. The freezing salt water swallowed me whole. The life vest quickly pulled me back up. Right before breaking the surface, I swam under the overhang of the cliff. That was exactly why I had chosen this specific spot. It didn't take long for Asher's voice to echo from the beach above. Chloe Sterling. He had finally seen the text. I heard him tearing off his jacket, ready to jump in. But Mia was frantically holding him back. From a distance, all I could hear were his desperate scrams. Thanks to Mia stalling him, I had enough time. An unremarkable fishing boat passed by and slowly sailed away. By the time the rescue teams arrived, I was already long gone. Our little childhood trio actually had 3 members. The third was Stella Monroe. Last year, she moved to Italy with her older brother and settled there. They say the most dangerous place is the safest place. I contacted her and begged for her help. She agreed immediately. When I told her about the insane novel plot, she believed me without hesitation. The very next morning, she flew her family's private jet back to the States. We met in the security booth of my gated community. There were no cameras inside the booth, so Asher wouldn't be able to track me. Inside that tiny room, we hatched our master plan. Originally, I just wanted to sneak away while Asher wasn't looking. But Stella was the one who suggested faking my death. I thought about it and realized she was right. If I just ran away, Asher would have me dragged back within a week. But Stella said, this is how all those groveling romance novels work. The male lead betrays the female lead, so she punishes him with her death. I seriously suspect there's something toxic in the water of our neighborhood. How else did it produce 3 absolute weirdos like us? Regardless, I no longer believed in fairy tale princesses. The princess's story ends with the prince loving her. My prince didn't love me. From today onward, I was going to be the wicked witch, cursing all the bad princes to turn into toads. My first year in Italy, I saw snow at the foot of the Alps. The first snowfall happened to land exactly on my birthday. Stella enthusiastically invited all her friends and threw a massive party at her villa. Right before midnight, Stella dragged me onto the dance floor. We danced from age 17 into age 18. She got completely wasted and leaned against my shoulder. She slurred that the female lead would eventually find her true happiness. I looked out the window at the falling snow and said, I'm already very happy. I meant it from the bottom of my heart. Aside from the occasional moments when I thought of Asher, I was truly happy. My first birthday without him was loud, chaotic, and wonderful. Without him, I could live a great life too. During the new year, I finally called my parents. At first, they thought they were hallucinating. Once they realized it was really me, they screamed and scolded me mercilessly. I hadn't told them my plan because I was terrified they would snitch to Asher. Looking back, I don't know if that was the right choice. But listening to them yell at me, I didn't argue back. I reminded them not to tell Asher, and they reluctantly agreed. Finally, I couldn't help but ask how he was doing. They told me that for the first 2 days, he sat on the beach from dawn until dusk, staring at the police boats searching the water. It took over a month for him to somewhat calm down. On my birthday, he sat on that cliffside all day. He ignored everyone who tried to talk to him. Displayed on his phone screen was the last text I ever sent him. After that, Mia took my place, following him everywhere like a shadow. My parents felt sorry for me. They said if I hadn't left, Mia would never have had the chance. I didn't tell them that they were already practically glued together before I left. I updated them on my life. The Monroe family had a small chateau near the Alps. That was where Stella and I were staying. I had been taking language classes for a few months, and I planned to enroll at the University of Trento by the fall. Stella and her brother had arranged everything, and it had cost a fortune. I told my parents to make sure they paid the Monroes back. Without a second thought, my parents wired $5 million to Stella's account. After months of living off my best friend, I was a rich heiress again. I showed them the snow outside my window on the video call, and they promised to visit when they had time. Before hanging up, they couldn't help but drop subtle hints that Asher had become terrifyingly gloomy since I left, and that he truly cared about me. I explicitly warned them that if they breathed a word of this to Asher, I would disappear again, and this time, they WowID never find me. After ending the call, I thought for a long time. I had left while Asher still loved me. That was why he remembered me. A dead first love is the most unforgettable thing in the world. But if I had stayed and waited until he completely fell for Mia, I would have gone from a cherished memory to an annoying stain on his life. If I left then, everyone would have just clapped and cheered. Since that was the case, it was better to stay a ghost in his heart. Once he fell in love with Mia, I would have made a graceful, dignified exit from his story. It was the best possible outcome. After completing a grueling series of courses and exams, I entered the economics program at the University of Trent the following autumn. 4 years later, having fast-tracked my credits, I earned my master's degree in economics. 5 years after I left my hometown, Stella was called back to the States. I remembered that I also had a corporate empire waiting for me to inherit. Figuring that Asher and Mia's relationship was probably rock solid by now, I decided to hitch a ride on Stella's jet and return home. I hadn't even eaten dinner after landing before my mom shoved me into a gown and dragged me to a high society business gala. At first, I hid in the corners, terrified of being recognized, until I realized that absolutely no one in the room knew who I was. I had hated these glitzy events even back then, so I rarely attended. And after 5 years away, my face, my aura, and my style had completely changed. No one could recognize me. Relieved, I found a plush sofa and sat down comfortably. Half an hour into the gala, a massive commotion broke out near the entrance. Whispers spread that a VP had arrived. Curious about who could make all these billionaires stand at attention, I cautiously poked my head out from the crowd and locked eyes with Asher Vance in a tailored suit. Asher wore a bespoke black suit, his posture impeccably straight, his facial features even sharper and more striking than they were 5 years ago. The moment he appeared, the air in the ballroom seemed to freeze. The corporate titans who normally looked down their noses at everyone were now tripping over themselves to flash him obsequious smiles. I shrank deep into the corner of the sofa, holding up a massive slice of black forest cake to hide my face, chanting internally, "You can't see me, you can't see me." After all, my current look was entirely different from the arrogant, flashy heiress I used to be. I was wearing a low-key champagne gown, my hair pinned up in an elegant twist, and I even had a pair of gold-rimmed blue light glasses on. It was a very intellectual scholar vibe. But Murphy's Law is undefeated. Asher didn't spare a single glance at the sycophants surrounding him. Instead, like he had a built-in radar, his gaze pierced straight through the crowd and locked onto my corner. He lengthened his stride, walking directly toward me. The crowd automatically parted like the Red Sea. I took a deep breath, turned around, and forced the most polite, stranger-like smile I could muster. "Excuse me, sir, I think you have the wrong person. My name is Arya. I just flew in from Italy." I swallowed hard, my fork nearly slipping from my hand. Run. That was the only word in my brain. I shot up from the sofa, grabbed the skirt of my gown, and bolted toward the side exit. I made it exactly 2 steps before a hand clamped onto my wrist like a vice. The grip was brutal, the heat radiating from his skin searing exactly like that day 5 years ago when he forced me to apologize to Mia. My entire body went rigid. A chill ran down my scalp. "Chloe Sterling, where exactly do you think you're running to?" His voice was low, raspy, vibrating with 5 years of suppressed madness and greed. It exploded right next to my ear. I took a deep breath, turned around, and forced the most polite, stranger-like smile I could muster. "Excuse me, sir, I think you have the wrong person. My name is Arya. I just flew in from Italy." Asher lowered his eyes, staring at me dead center, a chilling smirk curling on his lips. "Arya? Italy? Masters in economics from Trento." With every word he spoke, my heart sank an inch deeper. He knew everything. He didn't just know I was alive. He had investigated every single detail of my life. "Let go. You're hurting me." I started to thrash, trying to pry his fingers off. The crowd around us collectively gasped. Clearly, no one ever dared to speak to Asher Vance like that. Instead of letting go, Asher tightened his grip and yanked me flush against his chest. The familiar, icy scent of cedarwood instantly enveloped me. I took a deep breath, turned around, and forced the most polite, stranger-like smile I could muster. "Excuse me, sir, I think you have the wrong person. My name is Arya. I just flew in from Italy." Asher lowered his eyes, staring at me dead center, a chilling smirk curling on his lips. "Arya? Italy? Masters in economics from Trento." With every word he spoke, my heart sank an inch deeper. He knew everything. He didn't just know I was alive. He had investigated every single detail of my life. "Let go. You're hurting me." I started to thrash, trying to pry his fingers off. The crowd around us collectively gasped. Clearly, no one ever dared to speak to Asher Vance like that. Instead of letting go, Asher tightened his grip and yanked me flush against his chest. The familiar, icy scent of cedarwood instantly enveloped me. "Does it hurt? When you threw yourself into the ocean, did you ever stop to think if I would hurt?" His eyes turned instantly red, his voice carrying a nearly imperceptible tremor. I froze. Before I could even process what was happening, he bent down, hoisted me over his shoulder, and stood up. "Asher, are you insane? Put me down. There are people everywhere." I screamed in terror, pounding my fists against his back. "I went insane a long time ago. From the exact second you jumped into the sea, I lost my mind." Ignoring the utterly shocked stares of the elite crowd, he carried me straight out of the banquet hall and shoved me into the back of a black Maybach waiting at the entrance. The car door slammed shut with a heavy thud, cutting us off from the outside world. I huddled in the furthest corner of the back seat, watching Asher slide in next to me and order the driver to the cliffside estate. "I'm not going. I want to go home. My parents are waiting for me." I lunged for the door handle, only to find the child locks engaged. Asher turned his head, his eyes as dark and unfathomable as a bottomless well. "Your parents knew you were coming back today. They said you should come with me so we could have a proper talk." My eyes widened in horror. Great. My parents had sold me out. No wonder my mom practically forced me at gunpoint to attend this gala. The interior of the car was dead silent. Looking at Asher, that familiar dread began to bubble up again. According to the plot, he was supposed to kill me. Now that I had fallen straight into his clutches, was I going to make it out alive? What exactly do you want? Where is Mia? Shouldn't you be with her?" I asked, mustering every ounce of fake courage I had. Hearing the name Mia, Asher's brow furrowed violently, a flash of absolute, visceral disgust crossing his eyes. "Do not mention that disgusting name." He suddenly leaned in, trapping me against the car window. He reached out a hand, as if wanting to touch my face, but stopped dead in midair, as if terrified of something. That was when I clearly saw what was on his hands. A pair of black silk gloves. 5 years ago, he was a germaphobe, but he never wore gloves. Why was he wearing them now? "Chloe, you finally came back," he whispered, his voice so fragile it sounded like he was dreaming. The car drove all the way up to the top of the mountain, parking in front of a sprawling, fortress-like mansion. Asher pulled me out of the car, half dragging, half carrying me inside. The massive front doors slammed shut behind us. I looked around the cavernous living room. There wasn't a single servant in sight, only dim, ambient lighting. Asher, what the hell do you want? I already gave up my place for Mia just like you wanted 5 years ago. Why did you drag me back here? I yelled, backing up against the door. Asher didn't say a word. He slowly walked toward me. And then, to my utter shock, he slowly dropped to one knee. He raised his hands and, right in front of my eyes, peeled off the black silk gloves one by one, tossing them carelessly onto the floor. His fingers were long, pale, and elegantly jointed. He looked up at me, a pathological, desperate obsession churning in the depths of his eyes. He reached out, tightly grabbing my hands, interlacing our fingers. He lowered his head, pressing his lips against the back of my hand, kissing it over and over again. Chloe, I'm not dirty. From now on, no one but you will ever touch me. His voice was thick with emotion. Tears slid down his cheeks, dropping onto the back of my hand. They were scorching hot. My entire body went rigid. What the hell was going on? Wasn't the vicious villainess supposed to be ground into dust by the male lead? Why was the plot completely derailed? You get up first. I tried to pull my hands back, but his grip was ironclad. I'm not getting up. He sounded like a stubborn child, burying his face into my palms. Chloe, do you have any idea how I survived these past 5 years? If you were punishing me, you've tortured me enough. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. Asher, let's be reasonable here. 5 years ago, you forced me to apologize to protect Mia. You refused to believe me. What is the meaning of all this now? Asher lifted his head, his eyes as red as a rabbit's. Back then, I couldn't control my own body. What do you mean? I frowned. Asher stood up, gently pulled me over to the sofa, and sat me down. Then, he sat on the rug right at my feet, his hands still desperately gripping mine. Do you believe that systems exist in this world? He asked suddenly. My heart skipped a beat. A system? How did he know about the system? The plot in my head told me that Mia and Asher were the protagonists of a novel, but I hadn't known Mia actually had a system controlling things. Asher stared straight into my eyes, speaking slowly and deliberately. 5 years ago, on the very first day Mia transferred to our school, I heard a voice inside her head. That voice told her to capture me. It said that as long as she made me fall in love with her, she could steal your destiny, ruin your reputation, and ensure you died a horrific death. I gasped, the blood turning to ice in my veins. So, I wasn't just a vicious villainess. I was a sacrificial lamb meant to be harvested for my destiny. At first, I thought I was having auditory hallucinations. Asher offered a bitter smile. Why would I ever look twice at a lunatic like her? I warned you to stay away from her. I told you she was a lunatic, do you remember? I nodded numbly. I remembered. Back then, I just thought he was being an arrogant jerk. But then I realized, whenever I tried to rebel against the system's plot, I would lose control of my own physical body. Asher's eyes filled with agony. That day by the stairs, I clearly saw her throw herself down. I walked over to pull you away, but that system suddenly triggered a warning alert. It said if I didn't follow the plot and force you to apologize, it would instantly erase you. I was stunned. Erase me? Yes. It said you were a villainess obstructing the storyline, and if the plot derailed, you would be deleted from existence. At that moment, I couldn't control my limbs. I heard my own mouth saying those horrible things to you. I saw my hand bruising your wrist, but I couldn't stop it. Asher buried his face against my knees, his voice muffled. Chloe, I am so sorry. I truly had no choice. I had to play along with the system's demands. I thought if I pretended to comply on the surface, I could find a way to destroy that system in secret, and then you would be safe. I stared at him blankly. So he forced me to apologize to protect my life? Then what about the beach trip? Why did you bring her? You even let her touch your hand. I bit my lip, finally voicing the grievance that had haunted me for years. Asher snapped his head up, his eyes full of desperate grievance. I did not let her touch me. That day in the car, the system forcibly hijacked my arm so that when she handed me the water, our hands brushed. I felt so violated I went home and washed my hands with bleach 10 times. He explained frantically, terrified I wouldn't believe him. Going to the beach was a mandatory quest issued by the system. It said the beach date, plot point had to be completed. I insisted on bringing you, because I thought as long as you were by my side, I could keep you safe. But I never imagined you had already planned to leave me. At this point, Asher's eyes darkened drastically. The moment you jumped into the ocean, my entire world collapsed. That parasite in my head was cheering, saying the villainess was finally dead and the plot could proceed smoothly. I completely lost my mind. And then what? I couldn't help but ask. Then I jumped in to find you. Asher stared at me intensely. I searched for you in the water for so long. I really thought you were dead. In that exact moment, the hatred in my heart went nuclear, and it shattered the system's mind control. My jaw dropped. Shattered the mind control? Just like that? As long as my willpower was strong enough, that piece of junk code couldn't control me. Asher sneered coldly. The moment I dragged myself back onto the shore, the very first thing I did was wrap my hands around Mia's throat. The system was screaming, setting off alarms that the male lead was corrupted, and tried to electrocute my brain. I didn't give a damn. I told it that if you were dead, I was dragging her, and that out to hell with me. Looking at the man in front of me, he felt both like a stranger and deeply familiar. He was still the Asher who had bossed me around and protected me since childhood. He had just become far more obsessive, far more ruthless. Later, I tracked Stella's private jet flight logs. I knew you went to Italy. His words made my eyes widen instantly. You knew I wasn't dead this whole time. Then why didn't you come find me? I didn't dare. Asher looked down, his voice trembling slightly. I knew how much you hated me, how terrified you were of me. If I had just shown up, you would have run even further away. Plus, Mia and that system were still here. I had to thoroughly eradicate every single threat before I was clean enough to come bring you home. So these past 5 years, I took over Vance Industries. I systematically severed every single resource and connection Mia had. Because the plot was completely shattered, the system drained all its energy and went into permanent hibernation. Without the system, and without her main character Halo, Mia is just a lunatic drowning in millions of dollars of debt. Asher looked up, his eyes shining with a terrifying intensity. Chloe, no one can ever hurt you again. I exterminated everyone who stood in our way. You never have to run. Again. Okay. Looking at his pleading eyes, a chaotic mix of emotions swirled in my chest. I thought I was running away to escape my fate as a doomed villainess. I never realized I was running away from a madman who was fighting the entire universe for me. But still, something felt off. If the threats are all gone, why did you lock me up in this mansion? Where are my parents? Where's Stella? Asher's eyes darted away guiltily. I didn't lock you up. I just wanted to have you all to myself for a few days. Your parents and Stella all know you're here. They highly approved. I scoffed. Approved? You mean they were terrified you'd go psycho and slaughter them all? Asher pressed his lips together, offering no defense. I sighed and reached out, ruffling his hair. He had changed a lot over these 5 years, but his bone-deep, obsessive devotion to me hadn't changed at all. Asher, let go of me first. I want to take a shower and change out of this dress. He immediately tensed up, gripping my hands even tighter. You won't run away, will you? We're halfway up a mountain, and I don't even have a car. Where exactly am I going to run? Jump off the balcony and fly. I rolled my eyes at him. Only then did Asher reluctantly loosen his grip. There are fresh clothes in the master bedroom closet. Upstairs. I had them custom-made to your exact measurements. All your favorite brands of toiletries are already stocked in the bathroom. I stood up, rubbing my sore wrists, and headed for the stairs. As I reached the landing, I suddenly stopped and looked back down at him. Asher, what if I told you that I actually fell in love with someone else in Italy? What would you do? The color drained entirely from his face. A terrifying, murderous aura flooded his eyes. He stared dead at me, enunciating every single word. I would kill him, and then I would lock you in this house. Forever. A shiver ran down my spine. Yep. The man was still an absolute psychopath. But strangely, why did I feel a tiny thrill of satisfaction? Probably because deep down I wasn't exactly a normal person either. For the next few days, I lived the ultimate pampered royalty lifestyle. Asher didn't step foot in the office. Instead, he stayed at the mansion 24/7, hovering over me. He personally cooked every meal, inventing new ways to make all my favorite dishes. He even stood guard outside the bathroom door when I used it, probably terrified I'd pull a Shawshank Redemption and escape through the plumbing. Finally, I snapped. Asher, are you mentally ill? Don't you have to make money? You have this much free time? Is Vance Industries going bankrupt? I sat at the dining table, glaring at him as he meticulously placed a peeled shrimp into my bowl. Asher slid a black card across the table. The current net worth of Vance Industries is enough for you to spend recklessly for 10 lifetimes. If you're bored, go buy a few commercial city blocks and play landlord. I rolled my eyes and shoved the black card back. I don't need money. I need freedom. I want to go outside. I want to see Stella. I want to go home and see my parents. The smile faded from his face. Is it not good enough here? It's just the two of us. No, it's not. I'm growing mold. If you don't let me leave this house, I'm going on a hunger strike. I slammed my chopsticks down, throwing a full tantrum. Asher looked at me, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, he sighed. Fine. I'll go with you. I was thrilled at first, but then I realized the catch. You're going with me? So, you're basically going to be a walking ankle monitor? That is my bottom line, Chloe, he said, leaving absolutely no room for negotiation. I pouted, but gave in. It was better than being locked in a gilded cage. That afternoon, Asher drove me back to the Sterling estate. When my parents saw me, they didn't burst into tears of joyous reunion. Instead, they looked incredibly guilty and tried to shrink back. Mom, Dad, am I adopted? I go missing for 5 years, and the second I come back, you sell me out. I stood with my hands on my hips, furiously demanding answers. My mom laughed awkwardly and grabbed my hand. Oh, Chloe, you can't blame us. You have no idea what Asher has been like these past 5 years. He was like the Grim Reaper walking the earth. No one dared to cross him. He only started acting human again because you came back. We did it for world peace. I stared at her, deadpan. World peace, my foot. My dad quickly chimed in. She's right, honey. Asher's devotion to you is real. 5 years ago, he transferred 30% of Vance Industries shares to your name. He said it was your dowry. If you hadn't come back soon, the Sterling family was going to accidentally become the richest family on the Forbes list. I snapped my head toward Asher. He stood quietly to the side, a gentle, indulgent smile playing on his lips, as if the paranoid psychopath from yesterday never existed. When did you transfer those shares? Why didn't I know about this? On your 18th birthday, Asher said softly. I was originally going to give the paperwork to you in person. My heart skipped a violent beat. My 18th birthday. The day I saw the first snow in Italy. The day he sat on the cliffside from dawn until dusk. He had given me his most valuable possession when he thought I was gone forever. After leaving my parents' house, I dragged Asher to Stella's bar. When Stella returned to the States, she opened an upscale lounge and was living her best life. When she saw me push open the doors, she literally spit out her drink. Holy shit, Chloe Sterling, you actually made it out alive. She sprinted over and tackled me in a hug, then shot a highly suspicious glare at Asher standing behind me. Lord Vance, you didn't subject our Chloe to any medieval torture techniques, did you? Asher shot her a freezing glare, but didn't say a word. He simply walked over to a private booth and sat down, his eyes never leaving me for a second. I dragged Stella over to the bar. Don't even ask. He's turned into the ultimate devoted house husband. He literally waits on me hand and foot all day. Stella's eyes bugged out. Seriously? You have no idea how psycho he went these past 5 years. He absolutely destroyed Mia. Hearing Mia's name piqued my interest. What actually happened to her? Stella lowered her voice, leaning in conspiratorially. Rumor has it her system broke. She tried to use her fake persona to snag a few trust fund kids, but once the system died, her true colors showed. She ended up drowning in debt and pissed off some dangerous loan sharks. Asher had his people throw her into a literal junkyard on the outskirts of the city. She has to sort trash every day to pay off her debts. Anyone who tries to help her becomes an enemy of Vance Industries. My jaw practically hit the floor. That punishment was incredibly on brand for Asher. He didn't take her life, he just made her wish she was dead. Do you want to go see her? Stella asked. I hesitated for a second, then shook my head. Nah, she got what was coming to her. I don't want anything to do with her anymore. I was truly over it. The terrifying plot that had forced me to flee my home, that nightmare had been crushed to dust by Asher's own hands long ago. I turned to look at Asher sitting in the booth. He was watching me quietly, his eyes filled with absolute, undivided devotion. Catching my gaze, the corners of his lips curled up into an incredibly tender smile. In that moment, I suddenly felt that being locked up by him for the rest of my life wouldn't be so bad after all. By the time we left the bar, night had fallen. Asher held my hand as we walked down the bustling city streets. The streetlights stretched our shadows long against the pavement. Asher, I said suddenly. He turned to look at me. What if that system comes back? Asher stopped walking. He turned to face me and cupped my face in his hands. His eyes were unshakable. It won't. And even if it does, I will never let it hurt a single hair on your head again. Chloe, my life belongs to you. If I wasn't waiting for you to come back, I would have followed you into that ocean a long time ago. Looking at the madness and devotion swimming in his eyes, the final wall around my heart crumbled completely. I went up on my tiptoes and pressed my lips against his. Asher shuddered, then wrapped his arms around me tightly, deepening the kiss. The pedestrians, the traffic, the neon lights, everything seemed to freeze in that exact moment. That kiss carried 5 years of longing, agony, desperation, and ultimate relief. It was so passionate it was hard to breathe. 6 months later, Asher and I had the wedding of the century. The venue was decorated like a literal fairy tale castle. Wearing a custom haute couture gown, I took my father's arm and walked down the aisle toward Asher. He stood there in a white tuxedo, his eyes slightly red, looking at me like I was the most precious treasure in the universe. When the officiant asked if he would take me as his wife, he didn't hesitate for a microsecond. He practically shouted, "I do. I will in this life, and every life after." The crowd erupted into applause. Stella was in the front row, crying like an absolute idiot. Looking at the man in front of me, my heart was bursting with joy. As it turns out, fairy tales don't just have princesses and princes. Sometimes, they have a knight who is willing to turn into a monster just to protect his princess. My knight was a little unhinged and a lot obsessive, but he gave me every ounce of tenderness he had. The night after the wedding, I was so exhausted I collapsed onto the bridal bed, not wanting to move a single muscle. Asher came out of the bathroom, carrying the faint scent of cedar body wash. He walked to the edge of the bed, slid under the covers, and scooped me into his arms. "Chloe, you are finally mine," he murmured into the crook of my neck, his voice purring with satisfaction. I pushed his head away slightly. "Asher Vance, confess right now. Are you still tracking the GPS on my phone?" His body went stiff. He lifted his head, his eyes darting away guiltily. "I didn't install a GPS tracker." "Really?" I narrowed my eyes. "Really," he swore solemnly. "I only installed a biometric heart rate monitor. If your heart rate spikes or you're in danger, I get an alert instantly." I stared at him, dumbfounded. "Is there a difference?" "Asher, you absolute psycho." I grabbed a pillow and started whacking him with it. He didn't dodge. Instead, he caught my wrist smoothly, using his momentum to flip me onto my back, pinning me beneath him. His eyes darkened, gleaming with danger. "That's right, I'm a psycho. So, Mrs. Vance, you better be prepared. You are never escaping my grasp for the rest of your life." He lowered his head, silencing all my protests. The night was still very long. I didn't wake up until noon the next day. My entire body felt like it had been run over by an 18-wheeler. Asher had been awake for hours, leaning against the headboard reading financial reports. Seeing me wake up, he instantly dropped the tablet and leaned over to kiss my forehead. "Awake? Are you hungry? I'll have the kitchen send lunch up." I glared at him, my voice too hoarse to speak. Right at that moment, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered it, and a harsh, grating voice crackled through the speaker. "Chloe Sterling, you won. Are you happy now?" It was Mia. I froze, glancing over at Asher. Asher's brow instantly furrowed, and he reached out to snatch the phone away. I slapped his hand away and put it on speaker. "Mia? What do you want?" A neurotic, hysterical laugh echoed from the other end of the line. "Chloe, don't get too arrogant. The system might be hibernating, but it told me something. If I die, the plot automatically resets. Neither of you will get a happy ending." My chest tightened. A plot reset? Before I could say a word, Asher grabbed the phone and spoke into the receiver with a voice made of liquid nitrogen. "Go ahead and try. You think dying will trigger a reset?" That piece of junk malware was cracked, and its core code was dismantled by my team. "You could die 10,000 times, and this world will still belong to Chloe." Dead silence fell over the phone. Then, a blood-curdling scream of absolute despair echoed from her end. Asher hung up without a second's hesitation and blocked the number. He turned back to look at me, his eyes instantly returning to that pathological tenderness. "Ignore that lunatic. She can't make any more waves." I looked at him, suddenly finding the whole thing incredibly funny. "You had a team crack the system's code? When did you do that?" 3 years ago, Asher said casually. "I spent billions hiring the world's top black hat hackers and quantum physicists. They intercepted and decoded the electromagnetic signals that Parasite was broadcasting from her brain. The master control for that thing is currently sitting in a subterranean lab beneath Vance Industries." My jaw dropped. This man actually used science to defeat magic. "Asher, you are absolutely ruthless," I said, genuinely in awe. He was built different. Asher wrapped his arms around my waist and rested his chin on my shoulder. "For you, there is nothing I wouldn't do." I smiled and wrapped my arms around him in return. He was right. Who cares about the plot? Who cares about the system? In this real world, nothing could defeat the love of a fiercely devoted madman. The days that followed were peaceful and overwhelmingly sweet. Asher became the ultimate simp. If I sneezed in the living room, he would panic and call the family doctor. If I went shopping, not only did he insist on escorting me, but he would also buy out the entire store to ensure we weren't disturbed. To prevent him from mutating into an actual, irrational tyrant, I was forced to step up and take over the Sterling family business. I went to the office every day, dragging him along to Vance Industries to make sure he actually worked. Everyone in the corporate world gossiped that the Grim Reaper of the Vance family had turned to putty after getting married. If the Sterling heiress said a single word, CEO Vance WowID canceled billion-dollar mergers just to appease her. One day, I was in my office reviewing contracts. Stella stopped by for afternoon tea. "Chloe, you are literally winning at life," Stella sighed, biting into a macaron. "You're rich, gorgeous, and your husband worships the ground you walk on. Do you have any idea how many women are dying of jealousy?" I took a sip of Earl Grey and gave a helpless smile. You think this is a blessing? You have no idea how annoying he is when he clings to me every single night. Stella rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. Stop humble bragging. You don't know how good you have it. Just then, the office door swung open. Asher walked in, carrying an exquisite insulated thermos. Seeing Stella, he frowned slightly but gave a polite nod. Chloe, I made you bird's nest soup. Drink it while it's hot. Acting as if no one else was in the room, he walked over, opened the thermos, and personally fed me a spoonful. Stella shuddered, rubbing her arms. Okay, I'm out. The romantic tension in here is suffocating. I'm leaving before I throw up. She fled the office. After finishing the soup, I leaned against Asher's chest. Asher, let's get a dog. I said out of nowhere. He paused. A dog? I thought you hated pet hair. I used to, but I remember telling you 5 years ago that I wanted to get an Alaskan Malamute in college. When winter came, I wanted you to walk it so you'd be cold and exhausted. I smiled up at him. A profound emotion flickered in Asher's eyes. He pulled me into a crushing hug. Okay, let's get one. We can get as many as you want. As long as it makes you happy, I'll bathe them every single day. I rested against his chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart. Outside the window, the sun was shining brightly. There was no system interference. There was no melodramatic plot. It was just him and me. I finally believed it. I was never a vicious villainess. In Asher's world, I was the only princess.